I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would betray her husband in the cabin of an 18-wheeler, but here I am, about to tell you exactly how it happened and why I still don't know if I regret it. My name is Sarah, I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. My husband Marcus and I have been married for 11 years. We live in a comfortable house in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, with our 2 kids, Emma, who's 9, and Tyler, who's 7. Marcus works in finance, long hours but good money, and I run a small logistics company that my father left me when he passed away 3 years ago. We have 4 trucks, 6 employees, and contracts with several manufacturing companies in the region. It's not a fortune, but it pays the bills and gives me independence. Or at least, that's what I thought independence meant before everything fell apart. It all started about 8 months ago when I hired Jake as a long-haul driver. He was 31, recently divorced, with that tired look of someone who's been through hell but refuses to give up. During the interview, he told me he needed to start over, that the divorce had left him broke and broken, and that all he knew how to do well was drive. There was something genuine in his eyes, a vulnerability that made me want to give him a chance. Marcus didn't like it when I told him about the new hire. He said I was too soft, that I trusted people too easily, that this would end badly. I laughed and said he was being paranoid. How I wish I had listened. The first few months were normal. Jake did his job well, was always on time, never complained about long routes. We'd talk on the phone when he was on the road, just work stuff, delivery confirmations, schedule changes, nothing out of the ordinary. But I started noticing small things. The way he looked at me when he came to the office to pick up documents. How he always remembered if I mentioned I was tired or stressed. Once he brought me coffee exactly the way I like it, without me ever having told him. When I asked how he knew, he just smiled and said he paid attention. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more real confessions like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Around the 5th month, things at home started getting complicated. Marcus was spending more and more time at work, coming home after the kids were already asleep. When I tried to talk to him about it, he said I was being dramatic, that he was working hard for our family. But I could feel the distance growing between us. We stopped having dinner together. We stopped talking about anything meaningful. Our conversations became an exchange of logistics about who would pick up the kids, who would pay which bill, who would fix the broken fence. We became roommates, not spouses. And in bed, well, it had been months since he'd touched me with any real desire. I felt invisible in my own home. That's when Jake started staying longer at the office after his routes. He'd help me organize documents, check inventory, plan next week's schedules. We'd talk while working, and those conversations became the best part of my day. He told me about his marriage, how his ex-wife had cheated on him with his best friend, how he'd lost not just his wife but his entire social circle in the divorce. I told him about feeling lonely, about how Marcus seemed to have checked out of our marriage emotionally. I never meant for it to become intimate. I swear I didn't. But somewhere between the laughter and the shared silences, something shifted. One Friday night, about 2 months ago, Jake had just returned from a 3-day route to Dallas. It was late, almost 10, and everyone else had gone home. I was in the office finishing paperwork when he knocked on the door. He looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled when he saw me. He said he'd brought me something from Texas. A silly souvenir, a keychain shaped like a cowboy boot. It was such a small gesture, but it made me cry. I actually cried because someone had thought of me, had remembered me while they were away. Marcus hadn't brought me anything or even asked how my week was in months. Jake panicked when he saw me crying. He asked what was wrong, and I just shook my head, embarrassed. But he didn't leave. He sat down next to me and waited. And then I started talking. I told him everything. How lonely I felt. How I didn't know who I was anymore. How I'd become just a mother and a business owner but had stopped being a woman. A person with desires and dreams. He listened without judging, without trying to fix anything. Just listened. And when I finished, he looked at me and said the words I didn't know I desperately needed to hear. You deserve to be seen. Sarah, you deserve to be appreciated. The tension in that room was suffocating. I could feel my heart racing, could see in his eyes that he felt it too. For a moment, I thought he would kiss me, and God help me, I wanted him to. But he didn't. He just squeezed my hand, said goodnight, and left. I sat there alone for another hour, trying to understand what had just happened and what it meant. Before I continue, if you're finding this relatable or just can't stop listening, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. These stories need to be told, and your subscription helps me keep sharing them. Now, back to what happened next. After that night, everything changed. The air between us became charged with something dangerous and irresistible. Every conversation had a subtext. Every look lasted a second too long. I started looking forward to his returns from Roots with an anxiety that scared me. I'd dress better on days I knew he'd be at the office. I'd find excuses to call him while he was on the road. And he did the same. He'd text me photos of sunsets from the highway, saying they reminded him of me. He'd call late at night when Marcus was already asleep, and we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was crossing a line. But I felt alive again in a way I hadn't in years. With Jake, I wasn't just Marcus's wife or Emma and Tyler's mom or the boss everyone needed something from. I was just Sarah, a woman who could laugh and dream and feel desired. It was selfish and dangerous, and I couldn't stop. 3 weeks ago, everything came to a head. Jake had a delivery scheduled to Memphis, a 2-day round trip. The day before he was supposed to leave, he came to my office and asked if I wanted to go with him. He said he could use the company on the long drive, that we could talk business strategy, plan the company's expansion. We both knew that was a lie. We both knew what he was really asking. And I said yes. I told Marcus I needed to inspect one of the trucks personally, that there had been maintenance issues and I wanted to see the route conditions myself. He barely looked up from his laptop when I told him. He just said okay and asked if I'd be back in time for Tyler's soccer game on Saturday. That's all. No questions about my safety, no concern about me spending 2 days on the road. Just logistics. That indifference made my decision easier, though I'm not sure that's a good excuse. The morning I left, I kissed my kids goodbye and felt a wave of guilt so strong I almost canceled everything. Emma asked why I looked nervous, and I lied, and said I was just worried about work. Tyler hugged me and said I was the best mom in the world. That nearly broke me. But I still left. I still got in that truck with Jake and drove away from my life. If you're still with me, thank you. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Stories like these are hard to tell, and knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. The first few hours of the drive were almost normal. We talked about the business, about routes, about fuel costs and maintenance schedules. But as we left North Carolina and crossed into Tennessee, the conversation became more personal. Jake told me that he'd been in love with me for months, that he knew it was wrong, but he couldn't help it. He said that every time he saw me with that sad look in my eyes, he wanted to do something to make me smile. He said he'd never felt this way about anyone, not even his ex-wife. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to turn the truck around, to pretend this conversation never happened. But another part of me, the part that had been starving for affection and recognition, wanted to hear more. So I let him talk. And then I talked too. I told him that he'd made me feel seen again, that our conversations were the highlight of my days, that I thought about him more than I should. I told him I was confused and scared and didn't know what I was doing anymore. We stopped at a truck stop somewhere in eastern Tennessee around 8 that night. The plan was to sleep a few hours and continue early in the morning. Jake had reserved a room at a nearby motel, 2 beds, he'd emphasized when he told me. But when we got there, when we walked into that small, impersonal room with its faded curtains and worn carpet, the pretense fell away. We both knew why we were really there. He looked at me across the room, and I saw in his eyes a question, a permission he was asking for. And I nodded. I made the choice. I crossed the line I'd been dancing around for weeks. What happened next was not violent or rushed. It was slow and tender, and filled with an emotion that terrified me because it felt real. He touched me like I was precious, like I mattered. He looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. And for those hours, I let myself forget about Marcus, about my kids, about the life I was betraying. I let myself just be Sarah, a woman who was desired and seen and cherished. Afterwards, lying there in the dark with his arm around me, I felt everything at once. Guilt, shame, fear, but also a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I felt complete. And that terrified me more than anything else because it meant this wasn't just about physical desire. It meant I had real feelings for this man. It meant I'd fallen in love with someone who wasn't my husband. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you to subscribe if you're invested in this story. Your support helps keep this channel going and allows me to share more real experiences like this one. Please, take a second to click that button. We didn't talk much the rest of the night. We just held each other, and I think we both knew that morning would bring reality crashing back. And it did. When I woke up, Jake was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked at me and said we needed to talk. He said he didn't regret what happened, but he couldn't be the reason I destroyed my family. He said he loved me too much to be a secret, that he wanted all of me or nothing at all. He asked me to make a choice. Leave Marcus and build a life with him, or end this completely and go back to being just employer and employee. I panicked. I told him I needed time, that this was too big a decision to make in a motel room in Tennessee. He said he understood, but he couldn't keep doing this halfway, that it was killing him. We drove the rest of the way to Memphis in heavy silence, delivered the load, turned around, and drove back to Charlotte barely speaking. The intimacy and connection from the night before had been replaced by an awkward tension that made my chest hurt. When we got back, I went straight home. It was Saturday afternoon, and Tyler's soccer game was about to start. Marcus was in the garage loading the car, and the kids were running around excited. Everything looked so normal, so perfect from the outside. Emma ran up to me and hugged me, asking if I'd brought them anything from my trip. I lied and said I'd been too busy working. Tyler asked if I'd be able to make it to his game, and I promised I would. Marcus glanced at me, asked if everything went okay with the truck inspection, and I said yes. That was it. No real conversation, no interest in my experience. Just surface-level logistics. At the soccer game, I sat next to Marcus in the bleachers and watched our son play. I should have been focused on Tyler, on his joy when he scored a goal, on the pride in his eyes when he looked at us in the stands. But all I could think about was Jake, about the choice he'd forced me to make, about how different my life could be if I was brave enough to choose myself for once. That night, after the kids were in bed, I tried to talk to Marcus. I asked him if he was happy, if he thought our marriage was working. He looked confused by the question. He said of course he was happy, that we had a good life, good kids, financial stability. He asked why I was being dramatic. I asked him when was the last time we really talked, really connected as husband and wife. He got defensive, said he was working hard to provide for us, that I was being ungrateful, that he didn't know what I wanted from him. And maybe that was the problem. He didn't know what I wanted because he'd never asked. And I'd never demanded to be seen because I'd been taught that a good wife is understanding and patient and doesn't complain. If you're wondering what I decided, please subscribe to find out. I share updates on my stories, and your subscription tells me you want to hear the rest of this journey. The following week was torture. I avoided the office as much as possible, sending instructions by text and email. Jake respected my space, didn't push, didn't show up unannounced, but I could feel his absence like a physical ache. Meanwhile, at home, I started seeing my marriage with new eyes. I noticed how Marcus only talked to me about bills and schedules, how he played with the kids but never asked about my day, how he'd scroll through his phone while I talked about the business, how we'd become two people living parallel lives that occasionally intersected for the sake of our children. I also started noticing things I'd been ignoring. Marcus's phone was always face down. He'd take calls in the garage or in the car. He was dressing better for work, wearing cologne he'd never worn before. One night, I saw him texting and smiling, and when I asked who he was talking to, he said it was just a colleague about a project. But the way he'd quickly locked his phone made me wonder. 2 days ago, something happened that changed everything. I needed a document from Marcus's home office, and while looking through his desk drawer, I found a receipt. For a hotel room in Raleigh from 2 months ago. The same weekend, he'd told me he was at a conference in Atlanta. My hands were shaking as I kept searching. I found more receipts. dinner for two at expensive restaurants, flowers purchased 3 times in the last 2 months, none of which I'd ever received. And then I found text messages. He'd printed them out, I don't know why. Maybe as some kind of insurance or evidence. But they were there. Conversations with a woman named Jessica from his office, talking about how excited they were to get away for the weekend, how he was planning to leave me but wanted to wait until the time was right, how she made him feel young and alive again. I sat on the floor of his office reading those messages, and I felt a strange mixture of devastation and relief. Devastation because my marriage was even more broken than I'd thought. Relief because I wasn't the only one who'd been unfaithful, because maybe this meant I didn't have to carry all the guilt alone. But mostly, I felt angry. Angry that he'd made me feel crazy for wanting connection when he was getting it somewhere else. Angry that he'd checked out of our marriage emotionally while expecting me to stay loyal and understanding. Angry that he got to have his affair without the shame and guilt that had been eating me alive. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. I didn't confront him. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what this meant for everything. That night at dinner, I watched him interact with the kids, watched him laugh at Tyler's jokes and help Emma with her homework, and I wondered who this man was. How long had he been living this double life? Did he love Jessica? Was he staying with me just for appearances, for the kids, for financial stability? Please subscribe if you want to know what I do next. This story isn't over, and I need to know someone is listening as I figure out my next move. Yesterday, Jake texted me for the first time since we got back. Just 3 words. I miss you. I stared at that message for an hour before responding. I told him we needed to talk. We met at a coffee shop across town where no one would recognize us. I told him everything, about finding the receipts and the messages, about Marcus's affair. I expected him to be angry or to say I told you so. But instead, he just took my hand and said he was sorry. He said no one deserved to be treated like that. He asked me what I wanted to do. And that's the question, isn't it? What do I want to do? I could confront Marcus, throw the evidence in his face, demand a divorce. I could fight for custody of the kids, divide our assets, start over as a single mother. I could also keep quiet, use his affair as justification for mine, and suggest we both admit we've failed and separate amicably. Or I could burn it all down, tell him about Jake, let the truth explode and deal with the fallout. But there's another option that keeps running through my mind. I could choose Jake, really choose him, leave Marcus, be honest about why, and build a life with a man who sees me, who values me, who makes me feel alive. But what kind of mother does that make me? What example am I setting for Emma and Tyler? That it's okay to abandon your family when things get hard? That you should follow your heart even if it destroys other people's lives? I'm torn between guilt and anger, between duty and desire. Part of me thinks I should stay in my marriage for the kids, work through this with Marcus somehow, put my feelings for Jake in a box and pretend they never existed. But another part of me knows that staying in a dead marriage where both partners are cheating is not protecting my kids. It's teaching them that loveless relationships are normal and acceptable. Last night, I lay in bed next to Marcus, this man I've shared 11 years of my life with, and I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the birth of our children, buying our first house, family vacations, holidays, everyday moments that had built our life together, and I wondered when exactly we'd lost each other. Was there a specific moment? Or had we drifted apart so gradually that neither of us noticed until it was too late? If you've made it this far, I'm asking you one more time to please subscribe. I need to know I'm not alone in this mess. I need to know someone out there understands how complicated and painful this is. This morning, I dropped the kids off at school and saw other families that looked perfect on the outside. Smiling parents, well-dressed kids, SUVs with family stickers on the back windows. And I wondered how many of them were hiding the same secrets, fighting the same battles, making the same impossible choices. How many of those smiling mothers were dying inside from loneliness? How many of those dedicated fathers were living double lives? I'm supposed to decide soon. Jake has been patient, but he's made it clear he can't wait forever. Marcus is planning something, I can tell. He's been nicer lately, almost like he knows I'm slipping away, or maybe like he's planning his exit and trying to keep things calm until then. Emma asked me yesterday why Daddy and I don't hold hands anymore like other parents do. I didn't have an answer for her. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Jake again. He's asked me to give him a real answer, to choose one way or another. And honestly, I don't know what I'm going to say. My heart pulls me toward him, toward the possibility of feeling alive and loved and seen every single day. But my responsibility to my children, my fear of judgment, my guilt about breaking up our family, all of that pulls me back toward staying. And then there's the question of Marcus's affair. Do I use that as leverage? Do I tell him I know and flip the script so I'm the victim and not the villain? Do I suggest we both admit we failed and part ways with honesty? Or do I keep my knowledge to myself and let him make the first move? There's also a petty part of me that wants revenge. That wants to tell him about Jake in the cruelest way possible, wants to hurt him the way I felt hurt when I read those messages. But I know that's not about justice. That's about anger and pain. And I don't want to make decisions from that place because I'll regret them forever. So here I am, on the edge of a decision that will change my life and the lives of everyone I love. Do I choose duty or desire? Do I stay for the kids or leave for myself? Do I try to fix a marriage where both partners have already checked out? Or do I have the courage to admit it's over and move on? The truth is, I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe there isn't a right answer. Maybe every choice leads to pain and regret in different ways. Maybe the only real question is which pain I can live with better. I want to ask you something, and I really need your honest opinion. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you stay in a marriage where both people have been unfaithful but there are children involved? Would you leave for a chance at real love and connection, knowing it means blowing up your family? Would you confront your husband about his affair first, or would you keep it as ammunition for later? Would you choose yourself or choose your children's stability? Please, leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think I should do, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. I need this community. I need to know I'm not alone in struggling with impossible choices. Your subscription, your comments, your support, all of it matters more than you know. What happened in that truck cabin changed my life. But it wasn't just about what Jake and I did physically. It was about being seen, being valued, being reminded that I'm a person with needs and desires, not just a role to be filled. And now I have to decide if that's worth everything I'd have to give up to keep it. So I'm asking you, what would you do in my place? How do you choose between love and duty, between passion and responsibility, between who you are and who you're supposed to be? Because right now, sitting here writing this, I honestly don't know. And tomorrow, when I meet Jake and he asks for my answer, I still might not know. All I know is that whatever I choose, someone will get hurt, including me. So what would you do?